these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
for insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths. We hold these truths.
With Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
SITREP number 20. Thanks for joining us as we cover the most interesting news from last week, arming you with the facts. So let's start with President Trump. He's pledging arms sales for Ukraine. He's escalating pressure on Russia, increasing shipments of critical defensive weapons through NATO allies to Ukraine, including Patriot missile systems. The president has also given Putin a firm 50-day deadline, either negotiate peace in Ukraine or face crippling secondary tariffs of 100% on countries importing Russian oil and gas. Now, this strategy does mark a decisive reversal from the recent Pentagon's brief suspension of military aid earlier this month. It seems President Trump is indeed very committed to ending Russia's aggression on America's terms. I think to appreciate how much Trump's posture has shifted, remember the closing days of the Biden presidency. Biden played the bad cop by approving the transfer of Patriot missiles to Ukraine, some of the most advanced air missile defense systems in the world. At that time, that deployment was seen as a major escalation in the U.S., but this gave Trump a huge opportunity. It gave him the space early in his term to play the good cop with Putin and do what he said he was going to do. He was going to try and broker a deal. But that phase, I think, has played out the way I would have expected it to play out. His patience, Trump's patience, has worn thin, as it very much should have, after repeated attempts, and he's done everything he could to bring Russia to the negotiation table. But there's really no serious interest from the Kremlin. Again, you're dealing with an enemy that doesn't care that they lose potentially 30,000 of their own people every month. So according to the terms of the Trump administration's new agreement with key NATO allies, including Germany, Netherlands, Sweden, Canada, Europe will be sending existing stockpiles of arms to Ukraine, and in return will be given priority to buy American-made replacements in the future. That agreement allows Ukraine to enhance its defensive capabilities immediately without imposing additional costs on American taxpayers. Leave it to Trump to always come up with the perfect deal here. And let's not forget the critical mineral deal that he brokered with Ukraine as well. Speaking of critical minerals, how about a self-sufficient America? So the U.S. Energy Department announced the opening of the Ramaco Brook mine. That's our nation's first new rare earth mine in 70 years. Meanwhile, MP Materials, an American mining company, landed a $500 million deal with Apple, backed by significant Pentagon investments to ramp up rare earth magnet production here in Texas. Rare earth magnets power everything from smartphones to submarines, and yet China still controls more than 90% of that global supply chain. China's recent export restrictions have disrupted critical U.S. industries, forcing manufacturers like Ford and defense contractors to actually urgently seek alternatives. So in response, MP Materials stepped up in 2023 to become the only American company capable of separating rare earths at scale, actually operating out of California's Mountain Pass mine. That's the richest rare earth deposit in the Western Hemisphere. MP is now taking an even bigger step by expanding full-scale magnet production at its facility in Fort Worth, Texas. So additionally, as part of their $500 million agreement with Apple, MP is building a second magnet plant. It's all good news. Also good news about investments, Rust Belt revitalization through AI investments. President Trump is spearheading a colossal investment drive, over $92 billion to make America the world's powerhouse for artificial intelligence and the energy infrastructure to fuel it. On Tuesday, during a visit to Pennsylvania, the president unveiled commitments of $25 billion each from Google and Blackstone as part of a plan to transform the Rust Belt into a high-tech hub. Tech firms and energy companies are also joining forces on this initiative. AI startups like CoreWeave, giants like Amazon, investors like Knighthead Capital are all pouring in billions alongside partners to ensure that these data centers have the electricity they need. So the strategy is straightforward. Modernize America's aging industrial heartland, massively expand U.S. data capacity, and secure reliable domestic energy for these AI systems. It's all part of a broader plan to reshore critical industries and to beat China in the race for AI supremacy. So far, in Trump's second term, investments in tech and infrastructure have actually exceeded $1.5 trillion nationwide. Going down to Mexico, usually I'm talking to you about the cartels down there, and plenty to say, but you should hear this one. Screams of "Get out of Mexico." So Americans living in Mexico City are being protested. In Mexico City, radical anti-gentrification protesters took to the streets last week with signs reading "Kill a gringo" and "Get out of Mexico." Now, a quick note, just having grown up in places like Ecuador and Colombia, I was called gringo a lot. It's not a nice thing to be called. It's a derogatory term. It depends on how they use it. Sometimes they mean it in a nice way, but we won't get into that. But where did it come from? What does it even mean? And there's some distinctions on this, and I think it's worth telling you about. So the term gringo in Spanish, it refers to a foreigner, generally somebody from the U.S. It's thought to have originated from the Spanish word griego, which just means Greek. Now that connection stems from the Spanish idiom hablar en griego, which is, it's all Greek to me. And it signifies, something that's kind of incomprehensible or foreign. So that's one idea of where it came from. There's another theory as well, one that I've heard a lot more, but it has maybe less credibility. It's linking the term to the Mexican-American War. Now, back then, it's derived from the phrase "green go." That was a phrase that was like spray painted over walls. It was a protest against the U.S. Army, or songs maybe came from songs like "Green grow the rushes, oh." But those theories are a little less widely accepted. In the end, we don't know. They just call us gringos. Back to the protest, targeting Americans. We're basically taking advantage of cheap rent. They're working abroad. They're working remotely. It was peaceful until it wasn't. In several neighborhoods, windows were smashed, stores vandalized, threats spray painted across the city. Because they're blaming American expats for driving up housing costs. One activist group compared the influx of U.S. remote workers and Airbnb users to a new form of colonization. That's a bit extreme and a little bit ironic, too. I mean, borderless globalism is fine until it's happening to you. Even Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, had to step in and say, this protest is xenophobic. Now, the organizers doubled down. They said they're fighting for economic justice, not migration. But their signs seem to say otherwise. Now, this all comes after Mexico City signed a deal with Airbnb in 2022 to attract digital nomads. So there you go. Now on to the Texas special session. This is important for you Texans listening. Special session has been called. It will start on July 21st. And it's going to zero in on a few issues. The most obvious one will be disaster preparedness after the July 4th floods killed at least 134 Texans. Unfortunately, I have to say, I think that number keeps growing as we continue to look for the missing. It's absolutely devastating. I was there on the ground. Some folks from my own district, the Wilson family, was tragically killed. But I also have to say it was amazing to see thousands of people line the streets as Shiloh's body. Shiloh was the 12-year-old boy. Shiloh's body was brought back so that he could rest with his parents. I mean, the family's grateful that they found that they found their family, because now they can rest together. A lot of families are still missing. So legislators will of course address that. They'll debate bills to improve flood warning systems, strengthen emergency communications, fund recovery efforts for the devastated communities. Also on the docket, new protections for human trafficking victims, and and here's the thing, it's going to affect yours truly, a mid-decade redistricting plan. Now, the idea here is to potentially flip 5 congressional seats to GOP control. Republicans currently hold 25 of 38 Texas congressional seats. So, for perspective, a state like California has already done this, and I think that's the argument being made, and it's hard to argue with it. I tend to agree with it. California, I think, has 9 Republicans out of around 60 seats, just less than 60 seats. It's in a pretty absurd ratio considering, look, California ain't that blue, okay? And so a lot of blue states have done this, and the idea here is that, look, we want to keep the House, and we need more Republican seats. But this will, of course, come with some very intense political and legal battles, and definitely some implications for control of Congress after next year's elections. And, of course, implications for yours truly. I don't know what my district will look like. Hopefully I'll know in the next month or so. Just going on to some headlines for y'all. Number 1, ICE and Texas law enforcement arrested over 1,300 illegal aliens in June. Pretty badass, including a convicted plane hijacker, 9 murderers, and 32 child predators. Nationwide, ICE has arrested approximately 30,000 illegal migrants in June. That's the highest monthly total in 5 years. Second headline, former President Biden has admitted he used an autopen to sign mass criminal pardons during his final months in office, claiming he set broad criteria and then authorized staff to handle the details and, of course, forge his signature. Now, critics, and I would definitely join the critics here, are questioning whether this delegation of authority is appropriate or legal. Does it have standing? I mean, it's a bit unprecedented. Third on the list here, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, great friend, fellow Texan, now CIA Director. He sent a criminal referral to the FBI over potential crimes by former CIA Chief John Brennan for promoting discredited intelligence during the 2016 election. I want to get into a little bit more detail on that. So you all remember Crossfire Hurricane and the Mueller investigation that just bogged down Trump's first 2 years. It was all based on lies, and it was based on very bad analysis. And there's a question over whether the analysts themselves were bad or whether it was somebody like Brennan pushing his finger on the scale saying, you will write this. And I think that's why this referral is happening, because it's a clear violation of very strict analytical rules that need to be abided by in the intelligence community. So I think Ratcliffe's doing the right thing there. Brennan's not a good guy. Number 4 headline, Massachusetts judge, sorry guys to bring you down with this one, it's annoying. Another judge issued a temporary restraining order against part of the big beautiful bill that would have halted Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood for 1 year. The judge sided with Planned Parenthood's lawsuit, claiming the provision punishes them for providing legal abortions. Well, we'll see how that goes in the courts. Now, of course, we like to tell you some of the worst media bias. This one comes from the Buffalo News. I don't know if this is bias or just shameful or disgusting, but it's a mix of all of it. They published a political cartoon mocking the victims of July 4th floods that ravaged central Texas. It was drawn by, write this down, Adam Zyglis, Z-Y-G-L-I-S. Just want everyone to know. I'm sure he's on Twitter. I'm sure you can go say something to him. He shows a man in a MAGA hat holding water up to his nose, holding a sign saying, help, but a speech bubble by him saying, government is the problem, not the solution. You know, I guess what makes them fair game? Why would they do that? Oh, because Kerr County voted for 77% in favor of President Trump in 2024. So, of course, they're bad people who don't deserve to be saved, and you should have no sympathy for the victims. It's really disgusting. These kind of cartoons are not new. I've seen them a lot. It's not even an original cartoon. I've seen it during Hurricane Harvey that ravaged us in Houston back in 2017, and it's disgusting on so many levels. One, just the lack of compassion, but also the lack of understanding of what conservative principles even mean. Like, we're not anarchists. We don't believe in no government. We believe in limited government. And you believe in limited government and not overspending so the government can be good at doing the things it needs to do, like respond to a big disaster. That's what actual conservatives believe. I wish liberals would take some time to actually learn that. Now, if you read nothing else this week, you know what? We're going to give you my op-ed. It's in the Free Press. It's called Heartbreak and Heroism in Hill Country, Texas. It's really an op-ed I wrote about the heroes that I think embody the American and the Texas spirit. So you can find the link below. That's all for today. Thanks.